Welcome, everybody. Monday, June 26th. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report. Here to talk to you from Washington, D.C. today about the latest on the Russian civil war, the coup attempt this weekend. It seems the coup is over, but is it? It's not really clear what's going on. Let me get TikTok rolling here. We'll take a minute or two for folks to roll in, and then we will get started. In the meantime, introduce yourselves as always. If you don't mind telling folks where you're from, I think that's kind of a fun way to start the show. I am in Washington, D.C. Big surprise. There we go. Getting TikTok set up. Excellent. My wonderful comments. God bless TikTok for fixing my comment problem. Woo woo. Anyway, hello all. The news continues to be kind of fascinating about Russia and the insurrection. So kind of, like I said, kind of fun in a twisted foreign policy kind of way. Water. Hot day in D.C. today. Anyway, yeah, just wild. Putin spoke today, which was crazy. Hey, Flower Lady. Hey, Nicholas. It was just kind of a crazy day. Oh, hey, Bill. I still have to visit you. I'm sorry. I keep forgetting. Sorry. Oh, man. Anyway, guys, yeah. So just been crazy news here. Thank you. Hey, Courtney. Thank you for the gift. Trying to think. You know what? I'll start with like my background stuff I do while we're waiting for folks to come in. So welcome guys to the show. I am John Aravosis. This is my daily show that I do Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern time US, to talk about the latest news from Ukraine. As you guys know, thank you, Lori, for the gift there. First half of the show, I talk about the news. Basically, I go through the news and kind of pick what I think is salient and important for you to know, tell you what I think is actually going on based on my experience. Thank you, Elizabeth and KKL. And then the second half of the show, I take your guys' questions. One way of doing that is with super chat questions and super stickers, just to be nice on YouTube. Thank you, Lee Shaw, for that, and Tom. With the super chat questions, as a thank you, Lee, I will always get to those questions immediately as the next thing I talk about as my thanks. Hey, Jangle on Twitch, good to see you. And Ian, the TikTok as well. Another way you guys can support my work, thank you, Tom, is by what Tom just did on TikTok, and Chad, by doing the gifts on TikTok. The gifts, a portion of the money obviously goes to TikTok, but a portion goes to me. And actually, we creators make a good amount of money based on the gifts on TikTok and based on the super chat and the super stickers. It's actually quite significant amount of money. And because I do this full time and I do it, as my job, nobody pays me other than you guys, and I'm not independently wealthy. Your gifts actually do matter. So please do keep them coming. I appreciate it. And for TikTok as well, I will always try to do a shout out when I see the gift flying across the screen. Oh, hey, Gothenburg. I've been to Gothenburg during the elections back in 2010. Very nice city in Sweden there. So let's get rolling, guys. So crazy day again. So we're at day 487. Thank you. What are you? Day 487 of Vladimir Putin's special 3-day military operation. Obviously, not going so well. Putin put down a civil war this weekend, kind of, or did he? Let me give you a little quick background on what happened, okay? How did we get to this point of this rebellion this weekend, and also then kind of where things stands now, okay? So first of all, Yevgeny Prigozhin is the head of the Wagner mercenary group. Basically, these are soldiers for hire. Anybody who's familiar with the U.S. military at all, remember Blackwater, those private military guys who were fighting for us in Iraq? A number of governments use private military people to fight for them. Thank you, LWD. And typically, it's a company made up of former military people. So it's former men and women who were in the military who then they retire, and then they go fight for a private company where they typically make better money. And the same thing happened with the Wagner group in Russia. These guys made better money and had better benefits than the regular Russian soldiers, okay? So they're fighting in Ukraine, and they're actually fighting much better than the Russian troops in Ukraine. Generally speaking, the Wagner group fighters were really good. I mean, they're good, bad people, good fighters, brutal fighters. These are the guys who reputedly put to death one of their own who had, I don't know if he had surrendered or what it was to the Ukrainians. Thank you, TikTok Novice. He gets sent back and they beat his head in with a hammer. I mean, these guys were horrific. Thank you, Louis. And TikTok Novice and Louis. I think I got both of you for the gifts. Really just bad news, these guys, but they're very good fighters. Okay. Which is important, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. Thank you, Andrew. So over the last few months, Prigozhin, who runs the group, has been getting increasingly pissed off at, thank you, Alex, thank you, Martin, at the Russian military for basically doing a bad job. Oh, Anthony's birthday, birthday yesterday for Anthony. Okay, happy birthday, Anthony. Thank you, Ellie, for the trunk there. Very happy birthdays. Prigozhin's been getting increasingly pissed off at the Ministry of Defense over the last several months. First of all, because they're simply doing a bad job. And I mean, we all know this, right? It hasn't been very, it's been very difficult for the Russians. Let's put it that way. I mean, I joke, but I don't joke at the beginning of the show. This is day 487 of what was supposed to be a 3 to 10 day war. Obviously, it's not going well for the Russians, even though that doesn't mean the Ukrainians are going to win anytime soon. But if you're Russia, you were supposed to crush Ukraine like an ant, and you didn't. So Prigozhin's been pissed at the military because he thinks the military screwed up. He's not necessarily criticizing the soldiers as much as he's criticizing the top military people. The Minister of Defense, Shoigu, you might have heard his name. The top general of the military who now is in charge of the war in Ukraine, Gerasimov. These are the two men who Prigozhin called for. Thank you, LRDN and Nicholas. These are the two men who Prigozhin called for to be fired when he did the coup this weekend, or the coup attempt, right? He wanted these two guys fired. He thinks they're doing a bad job. They're the reasons Russia's not winning. But then it gets more personal for him, okay? A couple months ago, even, he's talking about how the Russian Ministry of Defense has cut off artillery shells to his units. Now, keep in mind that Prigozhin's men, the Wagner group, they are the main Russian forces that are fighting in eastern Ukraine over here in Bakhmut, okay? Bakhmut is this really insignificant town. I'm sure it's a nice place, but an insignificant strategic town, strategically insignificant in eastern Ukraine. About 65,000 people that the Russians spent 11 months trying to get. And it was ridiculous for them to spend all these weapons, all these troops trying to get this town. 100,000 casualties of the Russians alone. Ridiculous trying to get this town. But the Russians got it, and it's one of the only victories, if not the only victory they've had in the last 6 to 8 months. So for the Russians, it was a big deal in terms of propaganda. Who got that victory? The Wagner group, or Wagner group, as we might say in the US, okay? So the Wagner group, much more powerful, as we said. Prigozhin now is sitting here going, we're the only one who got a victory, right? No one else is even getting a victory here. The Russian army is doing terrible. Russian soldiers are dying. And the only person who's doing well is me, Yevgeny Prigozhin, and my private army. What does the Russian military do? They cut off their weapons. A couple months ago, Prigozhin is fighting in eastern Ukraine in Bakhmut. He's not, of course, but his men are. And the Russian military allegedly cuts off 80% of his ammunition. They just cut his troops. His troops are in the middle of fighting the Ukrainians. I mean, this shows you also just how screwed up things are in the Russian military and with the Russian government. The idea, no matter how pissed you are, so I'm adjusting my lights as I talk to you with the sun coming in, no matter how pissed you are, right? If you're the Ministry of Defense in Russia or Putin, no matter how ticked you are at Prigozhin for criticizing your men, you don't cut off his weapons when they're fighting for the only town that you might be able to get, right? Nonetheless, cut off his weapons. Then fast forward to a couple weeks ago, and Prigozhin and his men finally capture Bakhmut, again, the town that doesn't really matter, but they capture it. Kudos for them. They finally have some bragging rights to show the people back home to try to boost morale. Prigozhin then says, okay, we've been fighting nonstop since the war started. It's been 14, 15 months or so now. My troops, my 25,000 remaining troops are going to take a break for 6 to 8 weeks, and then we're going to revisit where we are, whether we even, actually, he doesn't even say yet whether he's going to keep fighting. Thank you, Ray and Ellie. He says, we're going to take about 6 to 8 weeks off just to rejuvenate the troops. He starts moving his troops out of Bakhmut, okay? And the Russian Ministry of Defense, the actual Russian military troops, start coming in. Okay, what happens? Prigozhin says that his troops run into a minefield. Okay, that the Russian military sowed a minefield in order to block the Prigozhin troops and kill them. He then says that the Russian military opened fire on his troops and started killing them. Livid at this point. Okay. Fast forward now, this is a couple of weeks ago. Fast forward now to Friday. Prigozhin starts the day with a very angry speech about how the war is a lie, how the Russian military lied to all of us. And again, he's implying Putin, but he keeps saying that basically the military lied, the heads of the military, who he doesn't like, they lied to the Russian troops. They lied to Putin, as if Putin's some kind of a senile idiot who doesn't know what's going on, right? They lied to Putin. They claimed, this is literally what he said. They claimed NATO was a threat. They claimed Ukraine was a threat. Neither of them was threatening Russia. Now, I mean, think about that, right? The whole justification for this war was the threat, the Enzis, the neo-Enzis in Ukraine were posing to Russia, and the fact that NATO was going to, expanding and going to get Russia and this kind of stuff. Thank you, Vicky. He says that was a lie. The only reason we invaded, he said, two reasons we invaded. One, because the Minister of Defense wanted another star. He wanted a promotion. So he basically pitched Putin on a war so he could get a promotion. That was the one reason. And the second reason was because the oligarchs, who are the rich, corrupt billionaires in Russia, Prigozhin, by the way, is one of them. But he says the oligarchs basically fleeced Ukraine, right? Remember how Russia invaded Ukraine as well in 2014. When they invaded in 2014, they stole Crimea here in the south, and they stole some territory in the east here as well. Not all of it, but they stole a good chunk of the territory in the east as well. Well, Prigozhin says over the last 8 years, mind you, the lie from Putin is that he had to invade in 2014 to protect all of those Ukrainians because they were ethnic Russians and they were so oppressed in evil Ukraine that hates Russians, right? So we came in Russia and we saved these poor Ukrainians. Prigozhin says that's not what happened. The Russians came in and fleeced the Ukrainians. They basically stole all their money. Thank you, Sam. And because they wanted even more money, the billionaires, they convinced Putin to invade again. So this is what happens Friday morning. Prigozhin says the war's a lie. We are fighting for a lie. And it's all happening because the Minister of Defense wants another star. He wants a promotion. And because the billionaires back home, who are friends with Putin, even though he doesn't say that, that's implied, the billionaires back home want to take even more money out of Ukraine. Our jaws all kind of dropped like, oh my God, what is he doing? And he still hasn't admitted the insurrection, the coup yet. Then he announces that he's had it. He's going to Moscow. He's taking the Ministry of Defense. He's going to overthrow the Minister of Defense, who's basically the Secretary of Defense. He's going to overthrow the top general. Thank you, B. Smith. And he's going to, it's not clear what he's going to do next. Thank you, John. Even if he gets that, because he says, I'm not going to touch the Ministry of the Interior. I'm not going to touch the presidency, meaning I'll leave Putin where he is, but I'm going to take the Defense Department, the Ministry of Defense. And we're all just like, okay, that's weird. Then he starts advancing. And his men, first of all, they take a town called Rostov-on-Don. Thank you, Charles and DJ. Rostov, more or less over here. I think if I'm getting it correct on my map, more or less over here, sort of east, just east of Ukraine. Rostov, really important town for the logistics of supplying all of the Russian invasion, because now, this time that Russia's invaded, they're also controlling this territory. So now Russia is controlling this much of Ukraine. All of this contingent on this city here. Well, Prigozhin goes and takes the city. He takes the Ministry of Defense office and basically takes control of the city, putting in danger Russia's entire insurrection. In the meantime, he takes the highway up to Moscow. The highway sort of skirts east of Ukraine and goes to Moscow. I think it's like 500 miles, 700 kilometers maybe. Thank you, Wilson. Takes the highway up and gets halfway up. Gets halfway to like Voronezh and some areas around there, blows up some oil refineries. By the way, blows up like a number of Russian aircraft and helicopters, at least one sort of reconnaissance plane, an intelligence plane, maybe 6 or 7 helicopters. The helicopters I read, by the way, several of them at least, are very important helicopters. They're some kind of electronic warfare helicopters that Russia doesn't have that many of them. Prigozhin blew up several of them. One, I think it was the plane, one of these aviation that he blew up had 10 men on board. They said at least 13 deaths, at least 13 Russian soldiers were killed by Prigozhin's men. Okay. So that takes you to where things are. He's closing in on Moscow. The Russians are literally blowing up the roads into Moscow, hoping to stop Prigozhin's men. They pretty much, thank you, Cheryl, they pretty much have no way to stop these guys because their troops, thank you, Brock, their troops are in Ukraine, right? The Russian troops are in Ukraine. It's not like Putin had 100,000 troops just sitting outside of Moscow, because who did he have to protect it from? Nobody thought the Ukrainians were going to march on Moscow, right? He didn't think his own troops were going to march. Also, one other thing to keep in mind here, Putin is supremely paranoid. Remember all those images of Putin talking to people at the table, and the table was 40 feet long? Whether it was COVID, which we know he was paranoid about COVID. He would make people, even once COVID was getting better, he'd make people like go into quarantine for 2 weeks before they could see him. He'd talk at that super launch table so nobody could kill him. I mean, the guy's paranoid. Imagine how paranoid he is now after everything else, right? Steven's got a question. Actually, Steven, let me jump in real quick. Steven's got a super chat question related to all of this. Prigozhin and Putin are rich guys. Yep. Why don't they retire to an island or go on a sub tour of the Titanic? It takes a special kind of billionaire to decide to wake up every morning and commit genocide. I mean, I will say this as a non-billionaire. I remember talking to a cousin of mine who's very successful in business, but knows a lot of really rich, successful businessmen. And he told me, he said, it doesn't matter how much money you make. You're always worried about your finances. You're always worried about money. So that's part of it, probably. They're worried. They've got money, but they want more. They've got it invested. What can happen? I also suspect that it may not just be a money thing. I mean, if you think about it, I think one of the things, think about this too. I've often thought, like, wouldn't it be great to be filthy rich and be able to retire? But then I've also thought, like, I think of my dad. When my dad retired, he got bored. Initially, my mom, mom is like doing things left and right. But my dad, his job was I think of me even doing this stuff. Like, my job is my life in some ways. If I stop doing my job, you almost feel like, what else are you doing? So, I mean, for somebody like Putin or Prigozhin, their job is their life. I mean, Putin is dictator for life. It defines who he is. He may not want to give up power because it intrinsically defines who he is. Power is the aphrodisiac. It's not money. I mean, money's great, but money without power makes him another billionaire. Money with power makes him the billionaire. Just some ideas, but I think you're dealing with these personalities and egos and everything else. Actually, good question from Facebook by T. Elijah Bob. How can he plan to take over the defense ministry and leave Putin where he is? That's part of what doesn't make sense about this entire thing. I mean, he was planning on taking over the ministry. All right, look, I think I've got a lot of other stuff I'm going to hit on. Thank you, Hector. But I think for starters, Prigozhin thought that the military was going to step up and help him. That basically he was going to announce this and everybody was going to rally to his side. Look at the citizens. Remember what the citizens did? Remember how at least initially, the citizens in Rostov, I see more questions coming up. I will get to them. Thanks, guys. Remember how initially the citizens in Rostov, when Prigozhin's forces took over, came out on the streets and were like yelling at them and berating them, right? That probably was a shock to him, right? Also, I think he thought the regular military was going to rally to his side. They didn't. I mean, from what we hear, thank you, Hector. From what we hear, there was an element of the regular military kind of sitting back and not engaging, maybe letting him cross the border letting his troops cross the border from Ukraine, things like that. But they didn't actually stand up and join side by side marching to Moscow, right? The other thing is, the more I heard from people on this, we know that I was going to mention this earlier, but I'll mention it now. Why not? We know that U.S. intelligence had seen signs that Prigozhin was up to something. We saw him doing these reportedly. We saw him doing these troop movements, and we saw them very suspicious troop movements around that suggested he was perhaps going to make a run for power. Right? Thank you, Elizabeth. He planned this. This was not something he just woke up Friday morning and said, I think I'll take over the Ministry of Defense, right? Thank you, Larko, right? I mean, so he planned this. He had men in place. He had talked to the military leaders and stuff. All I can think is thank you, Marcy. All I can think is either somebody had made him a promise that they backed out on. Thank you, Marie. And the promise was really contingent on him being able to win this. There was some promise. Thank you, Hector. Maybe it was even a promise in Moscow. Maybe somebody said, I'm going to take my military unit and I'm going to, take over some, I don't know what in Moscow, right? To welcome you, whatever. And it didn't happen. The second thing is, others have said the guy is a rich a-hole. Putin could have bought him. I was watching that this weekend on the news. Some of the Russian experts were saying Putin could have bribed him. Putin could have given him another $1 billion. Because again, even though, like what Stephen was saying, how can these guys want more money? But it's possible he wanted more money, right? Because these guys are never happy with enough money. So who knows? Let me see. Anthony, what if Putin blows up the new camps in Belarus, takes them out in one go? Revenge is sweet for Putin. Yes. So what Anthony is talking about is there are reports that new camps that can house up to 8,000 men are being built in Belarus to house potential potential Wagner troops that moved to Belarus to be with Prigozhin. Now, one of the things that happened today, Putin came out and gave a speech. I'll talk about, well, I mean, we'll kind of jump around here a little bit. It's fine. I kind of like doing it this way anyway, because it's kind of hard to figure out where this stuff goes in terms of all the news. So I don't mind doing it in terms of your guys' questions. Putin gives a speech today, kind of a weird, boring, disjointed speech. I mean, the initial interpreter, and I was talking to a friend in the media who said that the interpreter very likely was Moscow's own interpreter. The initial interpreter screwed up the speech. She was translating like 4 or 5 words and she'd stop, and then another 4 or 5 words and she'd stop. And all along the way, it was just, his speech was disjointed. It was like different parts of the sentences were different parts of the speech. That woman gets yanked. Another interpreter comes, starts doing the same thing, which makes me feel like it was Putin. You know, I'm dying to get sort of the written transcript of this speech to see if it was Putin. Among things he says is, thank you. I love, what was that? I love money. I love money. Exactly. We're talking about that today. Thank you. I love money for the cap. Among things Putin says is he reiterates the deal that he reached with Prigozhin, that the Wagner troops can either sign up to join the Russian military, they can go live with Prigozhin in Belarus. Belarus is the dictatorship next to Ukraine and next to Russia, or they can just quit the military and go home. Now, you know, for some people, they were saying, like, for the military guys, the Wagner guys were making a lot of money, and much more than the regular military guys. They had like 6-month contracts at a time, which means anytime they wanted to go, they could go within reason. Meaning, you know, if you got tired of it, your contract was up in a couple months. The Russian military guys were pretty much stuck now for the war. They told them they can't leave, right? So that's not good. So why would a Wagner guy want to join the Russian military when he's getting a lot more money with Wagner? He won't with the Russian military. B, with the Russian military, he's locked in for years potentially. With Wagner, every 6 months he can decide. C, the Russian military sucks. These guys hate the Russian military. I mean, traditionally, they know. Thank you, Nico. They know that the Russian military isn't any good. Thank you. I love money. Appreciate the gifts. And Dora. So there's a lot of reasons the Wagner guys may not want to join the Russian military anyway. We'll get to that in a minute. But what Anthony's getting at is sort of Putin's reaction. I agree with him. I do not understand why Putin isn't basically killing Prigozhin. I'm not saying Putin should do this. What I'm saying is, knowing Putin, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet and that it's not on the agenda. And I think it might be on the agenda. Putin once said that he can excuse any kind of sort of misbehavior from people around him other than disloyalty. Betrayal, I think was the word he used. Betrayal. If there is betrayal, he will never forgive it. This was betrayal. Actually, I know what I was going to say. In follow-up to one of the other questions about how was he going to, the question from was Elijah over on Facebook about how was Prigozhin going to like just take the Ministry of Defense when Putin's still there in Moscow? I think he planned on taking Moscow. I think he was going to get the Ministry of Defense. And if everyone came and supported him in the military, he's now got 200,000 men in his control and the Wagner men, right? Thank you, Leif. And the Wagner men. And now he tells Putin, you don't have a military. Right. You know, his men march on the presidency and take out Putin. So I think he was planning on taking out Putin for sure. Thank you, user. Let me see. Where do you think Putin is now? Good question. I heard that he left the country. Where could he go? I mean, if Putin were to leave the country, he can go to Belarus, Syria, Libya, North Korea, Venezuela, maybe South Africa, but South Africa, remember, is still not sure what they're going to do about him. He can't go to many places without getting arrested. Although there is Iran, maybe. Yeah, Iran. You know, but and China, maybe China. That's a good point too. The reason I say this is because the International Criminal Court came out, remember, and they issued an arrest warrant for Putin because of the war crimes in Ukraine, specifically because of stealing the children. And, you know, kidnapping all the Ukrainian children. I think there was a second one. I'm trying to remember. Wasn't there a second one that I don't remember if there was the second justification for the war crimes they did yet. I don't recall. In any case, they've got the war crime thing. So, you know, my guess would be, I doubt Putin is out of the country. I doubt he's out of the country because I think things are probably in better situation right now, but there's no way of knowing where he is. Thank you, Cal. Putin apparently is famous. I mentioned this to you guys the other day. Thank you, Vicky. Putin is famous for having all of his houses around Russia. He's got multiple houses. Again, because he's rich, because he stole all the money, but also to protect himself. If he's got a lot of houses, you never quite know where he's staying, right? If you want to kill him. Well, in those houses, one of his former security guys said that in those, who I think defected, so he could talk about this, in those houses Putin has all over Russia, he has offices, of course. Thank you, Mark, because he's the president, but the offices are all designed the exact same way. They look exactly the same on camera. They've got, the same pair of glasses, the same pens, the same coffee mugs. Everything is exactly the same. It's like my apartment. Imagine my apartment being replicated 6 times. Thank you, Infexus. So that literally it's the same blinds. It's the same statue on the wall. It's the same Greek plates that I've got on the wall right here. I mean, literally the same thing, so that if you looked at my video, you'd say, is he in Washington, D.C.? Is he in Chicago? Is he in San Francisco, Miami, or New York? I know he's got houses. Thank you, Martin. I know he's got houses in all those places, but every house looks like this, right? So the guy is super paranoid. But I think he could still be in the country, but I think he's even more hidden than he was before. Bash Brannigan, as a Ukraine supporter, are you happy the coup failed? Yes and no. It's funny. I asked my friend Vlad. Hold on, I'm going to pull this clip up of Vlad. When the coup was going on, I asked Vlad about this. So Vlad's my friend in Ukraine who does, thank you, Michelle, who does all of the humanitarian aid and the aid we've been raising for the Russian military, for the Ukrainian military. We've been doing a lot of fundraising for them for camouflage nets and a lot of aid for Ukrainian children and things like that, right? So Vlad's been helping me. Thank you, Mario. Vlad's been helping me with all of that. And we were interviewing Vlad on Saturday with our coffee talk we do for the paid subscribers on TikTok and the paid subscribers on Discord. Let me pull this up. And I asked Vlad really quickly, this is the one. I asked him, this was before the coup was over. And somebody had said, should we be scared? And I asked him, and he said, no, we should not be scared. There's no reason to be scared. And I said, well, but as Ukrainians, are you guys nervous at least about what's happening? Right? So this is what Vlad said, just to give you, because you made me think of that. This is a positive thing at this point. Yes?
Yeah. Let's buy popcorn and watch.
Well, I don't know if you can hear that. I said, so this is a positive thing at this point. Yeah? And he goes, yes, let's buy popcorn and watch. So at least as of Saturday, when it was still going on, the Ukrainians were like, yes. I mean, this is great, right? Because from their perspective, here's the thing. And that's why I say, are you happy? To a degree, yes. Prigozhin is just as bad, if not worse, than Putin. Prigozhin wanted Russia to use nuclear weapons. Prigozhin publicly bemoaned the fact that Russia has not used nuclear weapons in Ukraine in this war, right? I mean, he's bad. He runs a military outfit that is very effective, but brutal. I mean, his people, he himself is up in so much trouble for crimes against humanity, it's not even funny, or for war crimes. I mean, these guys are brutal murderers, and it is quite possible that if Prigozhin were to take over the presidency in Russia, he would basically double down and triple down on the war, right? So it could be much worse than Putin. But at this point, the civil war was fabulous, right? It distracted Putin. It made Putin weaker. It opened Putin up to more threats now from others, because what happened is, so far, Prigozhin has gotten away with this. He threatened to take out Putin, and he got a compromise. He didn't get killed. He got a compromise, right? He got to negotiate with Putin. I mean, that weakens Putin. Putin had to turn to little Belarus that's run by a man who's a dictator, but a man, the Russians have a nickname for him that it's some kind of a nickname. I forget what it is, but it refers to a collective farmer. The idea is basically the nickname refers to him as a little peasant in essence. Okay. This little peasant who lives next door in the poor country, in the country nobody cares about, is the one that is negotiating for Putin's safety. I mean, Putin in so many ways has been minimized by this, right? That has been a good thing. It probably would have been better, I think, for a lot of our perspectives, had this continued longer, because the chaos would have been good. It would have distracted the Russian military, distracted Putin. Thank you, Brock. The Russians would have, I mean, think about it. If you look at the map, Moscow's maybe up here somewhere, right? Ish up here. All of, I mean, they would have had to taken some of these troops and brought them up to Moscow to try to get their country back. That would have been great for Ukraine, right? Even now, Putin still has to worry. Putin is still worried about what troops are loyal to him, what troops aren't loyal to him. The troops themselves, they heard Prigozhin speak. They heard Prigozhin say, you're fighting for a lie. You're fighting because Putin and all those guys wanted to get rich, and that's the only reason you're fighting. They don't care if you die. You're doing this so billionaires can get rich. How does that affect men that are fighting in Russian military, probably not women. In Ukraine military, 20% are men. Thank you, Carol and Smiggy. But how does that affect people fighting in the military when you hear the senior leaders saying that basically, you're fighting for a lie. You're fighting. They want you to die so that the big guys get rich, right? I mean, it's the morale thing for Russia is terrible out of this. And it would have been nicer had it gone longer. But in the end, thank you, Dora. I think, yes, it would have been a disaster had Prigozhin actually won. Yes. How are the mercenary troops going to get paid? Well, I mean, they're supposed to get paid by the Russian military. I think that's probably some of the leverage they've got over them, right? They told them, you either at this point, and Putin reiterated the agreement today, you've got to either, if you're a Prigozhin guy, you've got to either join, thank you, Cal, you've got to either join the Russian military, you've got to either disband and go home, so quit altogether and go home, or you can go to Belarus and live with your buddy Prigozhin. Those are the three options you've got. The only way you're going to get paid is, I mean, maybe you get back pay depending when they get paid, right? I don't know if they get paid a month later or whatever, but the only way you're going to get paid going on is if you join the Russian regular military. And if they do, they're probably going to get, I assume they're going to get paid less. Red is asking. I assume they're going to get the regular Russian military rate, which is a lot worse than Prigozhin's rate, right? And they're going to get the bureaucracy, but also importantly, the Russian military is going to get a bunch of murderous prisoners. I mean, you're going to get people, literally violent criminals. A lot of the guys in the Wagner group are going to be joining the military. Good luck convincing them to listen to your orders, right? But the other thing you've got to deal with is the Wagner people. Well, as I said, forget the criminals. The Wagner people were animals. They committed war crimes readily. They gladly murdered their fellow troops who they felt were disloyal. They had a very efficient military structure. Russia does not. So these guys are going to sit there and they're going to be in the Russian military that's inefficient, that's screwing up, and they're not going to want to take it. What does that mean? I don't know, but it does mean it's probably not going to be great for morale. Again, in terms of how these guys react, right? All right. Well, that was a lot of questions from you guys, although it worked well in terms of what we were talking about. Let me see here. I'm going to jump into my notes and see what I've actually, you know what? Got 6:35 already. My God, that was a lot of information. And I've got more info, but let me do a quick pitch for my work. I do this for free, as I said, and I am supported by your guys' donations, the gifts on TikTok, the super chat, super stickers. I appreciate all of that. And another way of supporting my work, if you guys can, I very much appreciate it, is to give me a monthly contribution. You can do it via Patreon. I do have a Patreon link in my profile, but Patreon got really evil about a lot of Ukraine supporters. They kind of threatened a lot of us. So trying not to use them because I feel like someday they're just going to pull the plug on all of us. But what you can do, thank you for the gift there, Felix, is you can go to a site called Ko-fi. It's ko-fi.com. Actually, Annie, I'm going to remove that for a second. You guys can see the link at the bottom of the screen, ko-fi.com/Aravosis. You guys can find the link on TikTok in my profile. Thank you, Knausi. Go to my profile, click the link that says Linktree, and it'll bring up a page of links. The very top one is Ko-fi. So we got just go to my profile on TikTok, click the link. Ko-fi is the first thing. And you can give a monthly contribution right there. You can also give a one-time contribution, which I very much would love, but you can give a monthly contribution. Thank you, Bonnie and Alexis. And it just keeps contributing to me each month, which is nice because for those of us doing this full time and basically not getting paid by anybody, I mean, you guys literally pay my bills. It's nice to be able to see sort of how much money's coming in each month and not have to basically beg you for stuff every time here. I was gonna say ads. I don't have ads, but to beg you, for help every time. Thank you, Alexis. But please go check it out. It's ko-fi.com/Aravosis. You all on TikTok can find it in the link in my profile. Click it, it'll take you there. Thank you, Susanna. All right, let me go through here more and just try to find like little bits let me find here. Beep, 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 beep. Oh, a little bit more on Putin's speech today. He condemned the uprising. He reiterated the deal for the Wagner troops. He accused Prigozhin of betraying his country, of being a leader with no followers, claiming most Wagner mercenaries are patriots who were used by organizers of the rebellion. Thank you, Mika. That was very generous of you. I saw my phone go off. Thank you for that. That was very sweet of you, Mika. I appreciate that. Thank you, Bonnie. The most of the Wagner mercenaries are patriots who were used by the organizers of the rebellion. So he's trying to woo them back. In fact, hang on a second. Listen to these quotes. 2 quotes from Putin that he gave today in his speech to the nation. The armed rebellion would have been suppressed anyway. Putin's claiming that he didn't have to reach a deal with Prigozhin, right? They would have won. But he just decided to listen. And then he explained why he decided to negotiate with Prigozhin instead of just beating him, which he could have totally. I made steps to avoid large bloodshed. This needed time, including letting those who made a mistake change their mind. In other words, Putin let a large military force capable of kicking his butt approach Moscow and get within a couple hundred miles or a couple hundred kilometers of Moscow because he wanted to give them time to think of the error of their ways, even though he could have stopped them very easily. I mean, you know what I mean? It's insane. You wonder, this is where we're saying, in terms of how weak it makes Putin look. Putin, I'm calling him. How weak it makes Putin look. Thank you, Elizabeth. Right? I mean, I could have beaten them. Honestly, it sounds like a joke on TV. You know what I mean? Like the way somebody would write this character for a movie. I could have beaten you. I just decided to let you get within 200 miles of my capital and take over because I wanted to see if you'd learn the lesson of your ways. You're like, oh my God. I mean, just absolutely incredible. Thank you, Jeremy, for the let's go. Annie has a question. Annie reports the nuclear plant is loaded with explosives and new reports are plans to move civilians away. I didn't see anything new on the nuclear plant today, though. I saw, continuing concerns. And I will say this, Institute for the Study of War, it must have been last night. Last night's report said that they still don't believe, they're a very big think tank here in Washington, D.C., very credible. They still do not think that Putin is planning to blow up the nuclear plant. They think it would cause so much trouble for his own troops that he would irradiate so many of his own troops that the radiation could go into Russia as well, that they just don't think he would do it. So I don't know. There isn't any real news today. Thank you, Susanna. I didn't see anything about reports of moving citizens away. I will say this. If you're Ukrainian and you're afraid it's going to happen, you probably would want to move civilians away. Right? Because if you're Ukrainian, you really think the Russians are planning to blow up the nuclear plant, you'd say, any Ukrainians around there evacuate. And if you're Russians, by the way, if you're Russians and you're trying to just cause chaos and scare the Ukrainians and whatever, and scare the world, remember Putin's nuclear threats are pretty much for one thing, not to use nukes, but to convince you that he will use nukes. He wants to convince people in the West that he's going to use nukes. And oh my God, I'm Putin. I've gone crazy. You better stop giving support to Ukraine, right? To all the Elon Musks out there. You better put out your message. Agree with me to stop giving aid to Ukraine because otherwise I'm going to use my nukes. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. That very, very generous gift there. Thank you. So I think this is part of the same thing. I'm going to blow up the nuclear plant unless you stop the war. And the only way to stop the war is stop helping Ukraine. Right? So I think that's what's going on. And so therefore, if I'm Putin, I would evacuate the area around the nuclear plant just to add even more of an impression that I'm getting ready to blow the plant. Right? So anyway, that's my guess, Andy. Let me put it this way. Everyone around the plant are Ukrainians. Putin couldn't care less if he kills a bunch of Ukrainians. So he's not evacuating people because, if anything, Putin wants civilians there. Actually, the more I'm thinking about this, if Putin's going to blow the plant, he's going to blow the plant and blame it on Ukrainians. If he blames it on Ukrainians, he wants as many civilian deaths as possible. And the more civilian deaths, the greater the possibility of people in the West going, this has gone too far. This is too dangerous. Stop the war, right? He doesn't want to evacuate the civilians so that it causes environmental damage but doesn't really kill anybody. So, yeah, Putin's not yeah. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. There's a lot of contradictory stuff here. Six Evo, what do you think was discussed with Putin and his security service? What does the West mean when they are preparing for what comes next? I'm not sure what you mean in terms of what was discussed with Putin and his security service. I don't know what you mean. I think what you mean is Putin did have a meeting. He gave the big speech today and then had a meeting with like his top security people, Minister of Defense, security in that sense, meaning national security. He did have a meeting with them. Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I mean, who knows? It could have just been for show on TV, to be honest, because let's face it, up until now, Putin's been missing. No one has heard from him since this started. Since Friday, I think, no one heard from Putin. We kept hearing from his spokesman. Putin never spoke to the nation. Putin never said, be calm, whatever. Only today, 3 days later, Putin spoke up. That's pretty bad. So I think he may have had the meeting today to sort of show people, and and now Putin's meeting with the Minister of Defense because Putin's in charge, this kind of thing, right? That would be my guess. The second part is interesting. What does the West mean when they say they are preparing for what comes next, referring to the coup? I'm not convinced they mean that. There's two things going on. A lot of the military experts and the Russia experts think this is not over. They do not feel like, oh, well, there was an attempted coup. Thank you, Hugo, for the super sticker. There was an attempted coup. Prigozhin lost. It's over. They feel like this isn't over yet. For example, what's going to happen with Prigozhin's men? Are they really going to just lay down their arms? Are they really going to just join the Russian military? Are they really just going to move to Belarus and live with Prigozhin? Or do you have 25,000 men? Mind you, a 25,000 man strong, really good fighting force. Frankly, a fighting force that could have taken over the country, we now know. Are they really going to lay their arms down? Or are they going to, I don't know, organize around somebody else? Who knows, right? So that's the first thing people mean is we don't really know what's coming next in that sense in terms of this coup. The second big issue, thank you, Tom. The second big issue, and you've seen at least the Brits were talking about this today. I know every government is thinking about this, but the British government was talking about this today, was what comes next in Russia, not what comes next with the coup, but in Russia overall, what is the probability of Putin losing and Russia potentially falling apart as a country? That probability is significantly higher today than it was last Thursday. Okay. That's the issue. Last week, if you guys had asked, what's the chance of Putin getting overthrown? We would have said, I mean, everyone talks about it, but, there's really, he's really in control, blah, blah, blah. Right now, it seems he's not really in control. And the control he's got is really weak. And as we said, because he was willing to negotiate with Prigozhin, he has now given others who may want to challenge his rule the incentive, because what's the worst that can happen? He's going to negotiate, right? Mind you, this is also an important lesson for the West here and for Ukraine. What was the issue with, because I'm excited, Boris, why are you shouting so much? Because I'm excited that Russia is having a horrible day. That's why I'm shouting. I'm very excited. And you should be too. I know he's a bot. He's a Russian. That's why I said that. I made sure I gave a Russian answer that would make Boris the bot upset. Oh shoot. See, I responded to Boris and then I lost my train of thought. What was I saying, guys? What does the West mean for what comes next? Yeah. So the issue is, we're worried now that Putin being overthrown is a real possibility. And if Putin's overthrown, Russia falling apart at the seams is a real possibility. There's a chance Russia could dissolve. And if Russia dissolves, you've got to worry about the fact that Russia is a country with nuclear weapons that's falling apart. Just like when the Soviet Union fell apart, a lot of the states that came out of it, Belarus, Ukraine, others, had nuclear weapons, right? And you had to kind of figure that out. So that's what you also hear today when you hear what comes next, is there's concern that Putin's government is less stable now going into the future than it was before. All right. And Hugo, thank you for that. Let me see here. Yeah, dude, exactly. Dude. I just want to see if I had any other there's lots of bits, but let me see if I had any bits to throw here. Okay, I wrote down a lot of little questions that are still outstanding. Let me just throw you the questions. What actually happened? We don't really know what happened on Saturday with Putin and Prigozhin. Did Putin blink? Did Prigozhin blink? Did Putin pay him off? Will Prigozhin be killed? Will Wagner survive in some form? Who will run it? Where will it fight? Will it continue to fight in Ukraine, or will it fight far away in Middle East and Africa, where it's been fighting, but will Putin decide fighting in Ukraine is a little too close to Moscow, right? Will Prigozhin's men even accept the deal to join the military? How do you integrate criminals and others used to a brutal and efficient military structure into the inefficient Russian army? How do you get them into an army that doesn't pay very much? Will Shoigu and Gerasimov survive, right? Thank you, Christine and Poppy. The Shoigu and Gerasimov are the Minister of Defense and the top general. Is Putin going to get rid of them like Prigozhin wanted? Now, typically, if Putin were going to, he'd wait a period of time. He wouldn't do it for maybe a couple months, maybe even 6 months. He would wait so that it doesn't seem connected. But if he gets rid of them, that is a sure sign that Prigozhin did get the upper hand of Putin, and that's going to weaken Putin even more. Thank you, Ernie. Final question. Where's Prigozhin? We actually don't know where he is. It's not clear if he's in Ukraine. It's not clear if he's in Russia. Belarus, I believe, says he's not in Belarus, right? Belarus, Slick Rick says Belarus is a winner. Belarus is a winner, and it's, well, Belarus, its people are winners. Unfortunately, the Belarusians themselves are losers. They're losing out because this sort of increases the strength, I think, of Lukashenko, the dictator. I did see a Belarusian I follow, a politician or political person on Twitter, mentioned their concern that this causes real problems for Belarusians because could the Wagner group, if these men come to Belarus, could they be used by Lukashenko, the dictator, in order to oppress his own people, to hold his own control on power? You know what I mean? So that's a whole other thing. Whoops, hang on, trying to get rid of some folks here. What else? Let me just see. Beep, 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 beep. Yep. Beep, beep, beep. Okay, that's it. Let's you know what? Let's do Q&A. Or we've been doing Q&A. We'll do more Q&A. Thank you, Crazy American, for that. Why don't you guys on TikTok always try to use the Q&A function on TikTok, only because the comments you write here go flying off the page. Hey, Bariatric, they go flying off the page. If you put them in the Q&A link in my profile, they're there static, and it's easier for me to see. You guys obviously can keep doing super chats and super stickers. Hang on. Thank you, Mads. Truffles, is it possible that the deal was stop this or we kill all of your family? Yes. That was one report that came out. One report that came out was that Putin had threatened to kill Prigozhin's family. It's possible. If I were Putin, not if I were Putin, knowing Putin, thank you, Jazzlove, for that, for the gift on TikTok. If you're Putin, Putin would absolutely make that kind of a threat. Now, I will say, oh, Poppy, I hadn't seen that before. How fun. That was new. Thank you. I love money, but I hadn't seen that. That was very cute. Thank you. It's always funny when you see like a new thing. The only thing is you'd think, Prigozhin didn't think Putin was going to go after his family. That's the first thing I would think Putin would go after, right? Of course he's going to go after your family. It just seems a little weird. Leanne, thank you for the super sticker. Very kind of you. Thank you, Rose, there. Let's see. Elmi has an interesting question. Elmi Omar from Facebook. Can we say this is the fall of Moscow? Putin miscalculated and underestimated the strength of Ukraine. Yeah. And forgot use of other way. Wagner leader was compromised by Ukraine, and yes, Ukraine won the war. Now, there's a question. Where do Prigozhin's loyalties actually lie? Remember how, not remember, but those of you who watched for a while. Thank you, Von Taub. Von Taub just gave me a very generous gift of a whale, which is always a fun. We do the wave for the whale. Thank you. And folks have asked, who's Prigozhin really working for? Could he have been in cahoots with Western intelligence? Could he have been in cahoots with Ukrainian intelligence? There were reports that he'd been talking to Ukrainian intelligence. Maybe true, maybe false. Who knows, right? You don't know. Russia could be generating those reports in order to, thank you, Leslie. Oh, that's another one I haven't seen before, actually. Thank you for that. Maybe it was, right? Actually, Irina's saying on Facebook, his loyalty is always money, which frankly makes sense. He runs a mercenary group, right? They're there for the money. They're not fighting for God and country. They're fighting for, money, for rubles or dollars. Thank you, Wildesk. Right. So you can, if you work I don't mean if you work for money, like we all work for money, but I mean a mercenary group literally works for money. If you work for money, per se, you can be bought. Thanks, Elizabeth, because you're not really, right? They fight for Mali, they fight for Assad in Syria, they fight for anything as long as you pay them. Would they fight against Putin if you paid them? That's a really interesting question. You know, I don't know. But I mean, I don't know if that's what you were getting at, but that's Elmi. But that's one of the things that sort of makes me think about it. You know, is what were their loyalties really? Well, I mean, all soldiers. The thing is, I don't think that's a good question. Vapor is saying, don't all soldiers fight for money? Thank you, pediatric nurse. Don't all soldiers? I mean, if you want to sort of take it to that extreme, all of us work for money, right? I mean, we all work for money. That's not a surprise, right? Oops, that's kind of weird. Dynamic camera grid. That's weird. Huh. Right. So that's nothing new as far as that goes. But I think it's different with mercenaries. Soldiers, I still feel like you're fighting for your country, even though you join for the GI Bill, right? In America, they did, and they still do. A lot of soldiers join to have college paid. You're still, I don't know. That's a question for the military folks out there. Actually, do you think there's a difference between thank you, Elizabeth, for the pause. Do you think there's a difference between sort of mercenary fighters and fighters either in a volunteer army or even in a not volunteer army? Because if you're conscripted, you didn't join to defend your country. You got conscripted, right? You got forced to join in. Right? Or if you join the army because you want to get college paid for, you didn't join to save your country, you joined to get college paid. Is that different than mercenaries in terms of your loyalties? Now, I'm going to look and see what the answers are here. I mean, I agree there's a difference, but I guess what I'm trying to figure out, thank you, Elda. Oh, it's the creepy clowns. We're going to call those the creepy clowns. I love those. I mean, U.S. military gets paid plus benefits, but so do the mercenaries. Right. So do the Prigozhin guys. We're all getting paid as well. You know, I mean, I agree there's a difference, but what I'm trying to figure out is here's my question to put a finer point on it. You've got like the U.S. military volunteer. Some people join to, it could be family tradition, but some people join to get college paid. Is that person less likely to turn on his country for money than a mercenary? That's my question. Is the fact that the Prigozhin people are mercenaries, soldiers for hire, does that make them more likely to actually turn on their country for hire? That somebody could walk in and give them so much money that they go, sure. And they'd be more likely to turn against Putin for money than you'd be likely to turn against the president of the United States for money. That's my question. Right? Well, and Harry's saying they fight for the highest bidder. That's my gut telling me, you know, that I feel like maybe they'd be more likely, but I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't do it, right? Because I'd still feel loyalty to my country. To me, just because ask Blackwater. I mean, because to me, just because you're a mercenary, like I said, we all fight for money, so to speak, right? I mean, all of us do our jobs for money. If you want to sort of look at it that way. Thank you. What was it? LRDN? I don't know what Lurden Beast. I'm not sure what your name means, but I'll just say LRDN or Lurden. I don't know. I'm just sort of throwing it out there, but I think it's an interesting question, you know? What else we got here, guys? Trying to see. Lots of, oh, you know what? I was going to show you a couple of the auction items too, just real quick. So one of the things we do over on our Discord, we've got a really good Discord community, discord.aravosis.com. You can find the link via aravosis.com at the bottom of my screen. You guys can find that link in my profile as well. Go to the Linktree link in my profile, click it. First thing is Ko-fi. Second thing might even be the Discord. Ko-fi is how you become a monthly member. And if you become a monthly member, you can connect it to Discord and become a VIP member of Discord, which gives you access to our weekend show. I do a show every weekend, almost every weekend, just for the paying members, subscribers on TikTok, or the paying members on Discord via Ko-fi and other services. Actually, you know what? I just turned on YouTube subscribe too. I forgot about that for the YouTubers. You can now subscribe via YouTube as well and become a subscriber, monthly subscriber. Works the exact same way. And if you do, I mean, YouTube takes a little bit more than the other services, but that's okay. I mean, TikTok takes even more. But if you become a YouTube subscriber, it's a monthly donation to me, but it should automatically make you a VIP in the Discord. So just another way for the YouTube folks to be aware. Just set it up like yesterday, so I hope it works. If it doesn't, let me know. But yeah, we've got auctions we do as well in the Discord. And the way the auctions work is I buy cool stuff from Ukraine, auction it off to you guys. Half the money I channel back to Ukraine as humanitarian work that we do. Again, helping children, helping provide food to people that need it in the the areas that are attacked by the war, helping the military with making camouflage nets, things like that. And the other half is used to support my work because quite literally this is my OnlyFans. Yeah. I'm not even going to say that word. You got me worried. I almost said that, Troy. If I say that word, I'm afraid TikTok will the algorithm will hate me. That's very funny. But in any case, we've got cool stuff actually starting Wednesday is the big auction. At the end of the month, I always do. Thank you, Em. I always do my biggest auction at the end of the month. But the current auction that ends Wednesday, I've got about 10 things, including authentic Ukrainian military patch. These are the Velcro patches that the military folks wear. They're it's real from Ukraine. Very interesting Russian military patch. Thank you, LWD. This could be a Wagner patch. I don't know. The reason I say this is because it's a skull, and the skull is traditionally the Wagner look. What it says is our business is death and business is good. Business is going well. And this one's very popular right now in the auctions. And the other thing, there's 10 things, but I'll only show you 3 of them. The other thing, which I really like, it's wrapped in plastic, so it's going to reflect a little. It's first day of issue stamp at the bottom, and then a blown up postcard of it, of this the Ukrainian government put these out to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the song Carol of the Bells. Hark, how the bells, sweet silver bells, all come to say, or whatever, all ring to say. That is a Ukrainian song. And it was a song written by Ukrainian back 1914 or so. It was then taken by a Ukrainian American immigrant who was on tour, or the Ukrainian chorus was on tour internationally. He heard the song in Ukrainian and thought it was so beautiful, he wanted to write English lyrics to it. So the Hark, how the bells, sweet silver bells, that's because a Ukrainian American wrote those lyrics for an already famous Ukrainian song. And it's the 100th anniversary, actually already was the 100th anniversary of that song's creation and then the Americanization or the Anglicization of it. So this is a stamp devoted to it, but you have to get sort of close to see. It's very pretty. It's a really beautiful drawing. And then the stamp is even prettier, really, stamp at the bottom. But it's first day of issue stamped in a very pretty. Very pretty. So we've got lots of cool stuff like that in the auction. Go check it out. Home Alone. I don't remember if it was in Home Alone. A number of people are saying it, so it must have been. But I mean, super famous Christmas song. Whoa. Deal with it. Well, you know what? Yeah. Ukraine didn't exist in 1914. What are you talking about? Yeah. You know what? Kyiv existed long before Moscow did. So got news for you. Let's not play that game because the Ukrainians are going to win it if we play the who didn't exist game. Moscow didn't even exist when Kyiv existed. So, and Moscow and most of Russia, by the way, was part of Sweden and lots of other places. So, Miss Super Chat, I did not see it. Is there a better leader thank you, Heine. I always like that gift. Thank you, Mikila. I didn't see that. From Friday, I'm sorry. Is there a better leader other than Putin and Prigozhin if the coup causes civil war? Thanks, Sarah. I totally missed it. I'm sorry about that. God, who knows at this point, right? Medvedev used to be the better leader 20 years ago. He's now a blithering lunatic. He's the guy who keeps calling for nuclear war literally 3 times a week. Chris is saying over on TikTok, Navalny. I will tell you, the Ukrainians hate Navalny. Because Navalny, I believe, came out in support of the annexation of Crimea by Russia. But certainly, I think Russia experts who are not Ukraine, I understand Ukrainians concerned about this, but Russia experts who are not Ukrainian will tell you that Navalny is a hell of a lot better than Putin and Prigozhin. They will tell you that. Gorbachev just died. He's not going to help, Dan. But good idea on Gorbachev, but he's gone now. I don't know that we know of anybody else who's a decent fella over there at this point. Partially because you don't really survive in Moscow by being a decent fellow, by being somebody who's reasonable, who's open to the West and everything else. Andropov died too. Remember, he was one of the famous ones who died. Thank you, LWD. I remember when I was there, I went to the Soviet Union like 2 weeks after Andropov died. Remember, like Brezhnev died, then on the next year, like Andropov, then the next year was Chernenko, more or less. And they all just kept dying at the same time. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not the expert on Navalny. I'm just telling you that currently, as far as leaders go, Navalny is the best you got in terms of somebody who's got a power base, et cetera. And it's why Putin has him in jail and is trying to basically kill the guy in jail. But Ukrainians will tell you they really don't like Navalny. So I'm just sort of giving you full information on that front, just so you know. Let me actually go and pull up a TikTok question. Oh, thank you for the donation. It's not showing me who you are, whoever just gave that. I saw a donation for the Aravosis Report on PayPal. Thank you for that. I mean, later I'll see who you are, but thank you for that. Let me pull up questions. Oops. And I've got another dinner tonight, but I don't have to leave for half an hour, so I'm not in a rush. My friend Marion, who always joins in on TikTok, on YouTube with us, is in DC this week. So old friend from graduate school. So we're going to go and have dinner tonight and talk about, I tried to get her on the show tonight because Marion is like Russia expert. Imagine an American studying Russian who then went and practiced law in Russian. So Marion would negotiate contracts in Russian. She would look at the Russian Constitution and Russian law and debate the fineness of it in Russian. I was like, oh my God. So Marion really knows Russian, but alas, she could not join us tonight. Benji says, do you think the countries will expect civilian contracts to rebuild Ukraine and inflate their economies? I mean, look, already, and I mean, I don't fault them entirely. The European Union, for example, got together and decided to provide Ukraine with how much was it? Was it 1 million pieces of artillery? I think it was 1 million artillery shells. They committed to find Ukraine, and it got delayed a month because the French and the Greeks, well, the French especially, the French demanded that there basically be a buy Europe clause, buy European, that if we bought artillery shells, if we gave it to industries to make these shells, we should do it to European industries because it's European money. And it's something that America does all the time, by the way, so I'm not going to knock Europe. But it's something that kind of slowed things down. I would not be surprised if European governments and America and Japan and whoever else ponies up, maybe the Arab states, who knows, ponies up money to help rebuild Ukraine. They're certainly going to want that money to go to, it'll go to Ukrainians, but I can imagine why they'd want some of the money to go to their own companies. It just kind of makes sense because each government still has a domestic constituency. I mean, in the end, my government is looking out for my best interests. Your government's looking out for your best interests. We're in Ukraine because we care, but we're also in Ukraine because we think it's in our national interest to help the Ukrainians against the Russians, right? So I would not be surprised if in the end they try to sort of make sure the money goes through their own companies again. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I mean, if people are putting up, billions and billions or hundreds of billions of dollars, I don't have a problem with them saying, I'd like sort of a part of it to go to our companies. Why not? Beep, beep, beep. Just looking here. Magical says, what if Russia will only offer the Wagner military folks less than they were making at Wagner? Well, that's the concern. I think they are going to offer them less. I mean, the Wagner group paid a lot more than the Russian military paid, this mercenary group. Putin is now saying that these soldiers, these 25,000 Wagner guys, either have to join the Russian military, they can just quit and go home, or they join Prigozhin in Belarus. I mean, how do you join the Russian military and take a pay cut? Mind you, for these guys especially, they've been working in a kick-ass military unit. I mean, the Wagner group kicks ass. They're war criminals. I'm not saying they're good people. I'm saying they're very good at what they do, but they're criminals and they're thieves and they're murderers. Okay. But you could say somebody's a really good murderer or a good cat burglar, right? So if you're coming from a group that's really good at what you do, why would you want to join a group that's really bad at what you do, which is the Russian military? And they're the competitors who suck. They're the guys suck, that you've been making fun of all these years. Why would you join the company that sucks, that you make fun of, that is worse than you, that you're working with a bunch of people who are inept and don't know what they're doing and might get you killed? You're going to take a pay cut to do it. You're taking a benefits cut to do it. And final point, when you worked for Wagner, you had 6-month contracts. So every 6 months you could decide, hey, I think I'm done now. I made enough money, whatever. With the Russian military, you ain't going nowhere. You're stuck until the end of the war, and who knows? That's what we're told the 3 options are. Now, what wasn't clear, and we had heard this on the weekend, we had heard that the options were a little more nuanced, which was basically only we didn't hear that today from Putin, but only the Wagner men who didn't join in the insurrection could join the Russian military. But the ones who did join in the insurrection would have to either quit and go home or go to Belarus. That's what we heard. So who knows? Yeah, I saw this thing. Metallium Harvester is saying, what's your opinion on the Russian military bloggers calling out Putin for being weak on Wagner and Prigozhin? From what I saw, there was sort of a diversity of views. In other words, these are sort of the Russian military, ex-military folks who write online. They tend to be far right extra nationalists, big nationalist types, meaning, super pro-war. They think the war isn't being fought hard enough. In other words, they're very pro-Prigozhin in some ways. Thank you, Misha, for the gift. Please do keep the gifts coming on TikTok, guys. I appreciate it. Some of them are saying they're pissed at Putin for reaching a deal because Prigozhin and his men literally killed at least 13 Russian military officers or military men. Thank you, Misha, for the hearts. And who's the Hedge for the corgi, right? So that's one problem right there. And the guy tried to overthrow the government. I mean, you just kind of say, oh, well. I mean, this is the way I feel about the insurrection here. It's like, you don't just say, oh, well, you tried to violently overthrow the government. Oh, well, let's just call it a day, right? I mean, so I can understand where they're coming from. Some of them, however, the Russian military bloggers are saying, oh, let's just move on. It's fine. Yeah, it's better that we just got it behind us. So my suspicion is some of them realize this is a threat to Putin. Thank you, Karen, for that. They realize it's a threat for Putin and they don't want to go there. They just want to sort of put it behind them because it's too much of a threat to their country. And they're not wrong. Thank you, Misha. This is a threat to their country. So I don't know. I think, this is one of those things that we're going to have to go several days and see how it pans out, especially since, thank you, Karen and Misha again. Thank you. Especially since we don't even really know what's going on yet. We don't even know if Prigozhin, thank you, Benji. If Prigozhin even totally accepted this deal. There was news yesterday that the Chechens, hang on a second, the Chechens, who are also fighters alongside the Russians, under Kadyrov, Looney Tunes dictator himself, and that the Chechens had gotten their hands on one of the Wagner men who supported the civil war, the coup or whatever. Thank you, Annette. And they did a video and executed him on camera. Now, I would not watch that video on purpose because I don't like watching videos like that, but it's all over the place. Is it real? Who knows? People say it looks real. If you're a Wagner guy, that does not give you a lot of confidence into joining up with the Ukrainian, with the Russian troops. If the Kadyrov guys, who are Chechens who are fighting for the Russians, are literally executing your fellow men, right? Because it means they could execute you. So anyway, who knows? I'm going to grab a few more questions and then we'll call it quits, guys, because we're already 11 after. Thank you, JR, for the money gun. Like I said, because I've got to run out around 7:30 to join Marianne for dinner, where we're going to talk. I'm going to pick her brain about Russia, and then, which means I can deduct it. Woo woo! Pick her brain about Russia, and then report to you guys what she's been telling me tomorrow. Well, don't worry, Marianne. I won't tell them everything. I won't attribute it to you. Alice. Alice was talking to Metallium. What else we got, guys? I'm looking at TikTok here. Odds of Worn out field Russian commanders in Ukraine seeing an opportunity for a military coup. Well, I mean, that's the question is who else in Russia now might look at this and say, you know what? Prigozhin did it and, he got away with it. And Putin, I will tell you this. I mean, Putin negotiating is weird. It's weird. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. Actually, this is almost a good point to end on, possibly. We were told by some people, actually, even by Biden, I mean, I'm not going to go on my Biden rant, don't worry. But we were told, oh boy, Vladimir Putin, you don't want to make him angry. World War III, a cornered rat is the most dangerous. Thank you, Benji. Remember all that stuff about Putin. Well, the rat got cornered, and you know what happened? he threw his hands up and said, don't hurt me. That's what happened. The Putin rat showed that when he's cornered and put up against the wall, he does anything he can to save his life. That's what the cornered rat. He didn't use his nukes. He could have dropped a nuke. He could have dropped a nuke on these guys. Maybe he didn't. I think there's a really interesting lesson here. Oh, thank you, Marie. I think there's a really interesting lesson here as to what this tells the Ukrainians about Russia, about Putin, about what it tells the West about Putin, right? I mean, very interesting. Because you've got a lot of leaders looking at this and going, like I said, this guy's Putin crumbled like the Russian military crumbled, right? The Russian military was supposed to win this war in 3 to 10 days. As I said at the starting of the show, we're at day 487, I think. Yeah, 487 of this 3-day war. And the Russian military crumbled. Putin was invincible. Putin would never crumble, no matter what. Putin would use nukes. Putin would never. Remember, by the way, existential threat. We were told if Russia faces an existential threat, they'll use nukes. Russia faced an existential threat from Prigozhin. They didn't even fight. And by the way, he did have nukes. He could have dropped some nukes on the troops and ended it. It would have been really bad, but he could have. Putin folded like a lawn chair, according to Squee on TikTok. Exactly. Putin folded. I mean, I don't know that Putin would fold next time, like about us taking him on, but Jesus, he comes off weak as hell. And I think if you're NATO right now looking at this, you're starting to go, you know what? This guy, at least we know to a degree, he buckles when he's really cornered. Doesn't mean he would buckle in the future. Who knows? All right. I am going to call it quits, guys. It's 7:15. We've been going for an hour and a half. Why do you never see me on TikTok? Because TikTok's algorithm is being evil. I'm on every night. I am on TikTok Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. I usually do videos throughout the day. I kind of missed it today. I'm sorry. I was doing like lots of news updates for you guys, but I didn't do video updates throughout the day. I apologize for that. But I do my show every night, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. We're still, and by the way, there were really no war updates today. I even looked into it. Ukraine advanced a little bit around Bakhmut from the north and south. They made some small advance over the weekend, but there wasn't really a ton of news. They got a town back. I forget the name. Starts with an R. One of the towns that they lost to Russia, they got back, which is great. But there weren't a lot of updates. And I think this coup thing is clearly a fascinating topic, but also let's see what impact, hopefully, it has on Ukraine and the war going forward. I'm not even going to summarize because I don't know how the hell I would even summarize the stuff that we normally do. I'm just going to thank you guys for joining. I will say hi to Marion for you at dinner because normally she joins you guys. Normally she's watching with the rest of you, but she said she had I'm not going to do the recap today because honestly, there's almost too much in the recap. I'm just going to leave it as is. You guys can always watch the show on YouTube. By the way, anybody who comes on TikTok late, the show is always on YouTube afterwards. It's my John Aravosis DC account. That's my last name, John Aravosis DC, as in District of Columbia. And go over to YouTube and you can watch the recording there of the show. And thank you, everybody. This was great. And thank you for the gifts, by the way. I could tell it was a very gifty evening, including the gifts on PayPal and Cash App, which is very sweet of you all. Thank you, Dawn. And remember, final point, like I always said, if you can afford it and you've been watching a while and like my work, please do consider going and starting a monthly subscription to support me. You can do it on Ko-fi, link at the bottom of the screen for you guys. It's ko-fi.com/Aravosis. You can find the link in my profile that says Linktree on TikTok. Click that link. Very first thing that comes up is Ko-fi. Click it and go through, and you'll be able to make a monthly donation that continues each month, and it makes you a and that which platform? Hard to say. I say Ko-fi might be the best. Ko-fi might be the best, but it makes you a VIP member of the Discord, which gives you access to the weekend show that I do. Actually, this weekend we did 2 live weekend shows about the coup with Vlad and Ukraine, just for subscribers, which was quite fun. But you can use Ko-fi. YouTubers, I do have YouTube subscriptions set up now, so you guys could always join for monthly subscriptions if you want to, and it should automatically make you VIP members of the Discord as well, I am told. If it doesn't, we will hopefully fix it. Patreon is still there. You can give on Patreon. The only thing with Patreon is Patreon has threatened me and a lot of other Ukrainian bloggers and etc., so that I can only accept money on Patreon to support my journalism. I cannot link it to Discord. So if you give on Patreon, that is a wonderfully generous donation to support my journalism, but I cannot use it to make you a VIP on Patreon, because Patreon I had to keep separate, they said. So feel free. My Patreon is in my profile, in the same link, the Aravosis.com, or the link in my profile for you guys. You can find, if you only want to give on Patreon, go ahead. It's there. But I will not be able to make you a VIP in my Discord, is my point, because Patreon made them separate because they're a little evil now. Okay, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to go enjoy dinner with Marion. See you all tomorrow. This was good tonight. I enjoyed this. Even for me, this was fun. This topic I find absolutely fascinating. Okay, have a good night, guys. Thank you. You all thank you. Mods, as always, thank you. You kick ass. And I got to get some people myself.